Thank you for joining us for our presentation on researching, preserving, and teaching women's history at the Citadel. My name is Tessa Updike, and I am the archivist and an associate professor for the Citadel, the Military College of South Carolina in Charleston.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Danielle Moore, and I'm the Deputy Director of Danielle Library at the Citadel and an assistant professor.
In the next 30 minutes, we will give a brief introduction to women's history at the Citadel. We'll talk about the research we are doing and share some favorite stories that we found. Then we'll describe how we are teaching and sharing this history and share thoughts on what it means to be a woman at the Citadel. We'll start with a very brief overview of women's history at the Citadel and then a brief overview of our collections. We've broken up our institutional history into 4 time periods. The first is from the Citadel's establishment in 1842 through the end of the Civil War. In these early years, women appear in our archive collections mostly in letters and diaries of cadets, faculty, and administrators, as girlfriends, wives, and mothers. The only mention of women in our college records at this time are the laundresses who would pick up cadet laundry twice a week to wash and return to campus. Women also appear in these early years in the context of slavery. A number of faculty, staff, and administrators at the Citadel owned enslaved people. One documented account is from the diary of mathematics professor John B. Patrick. His diary is pictured here, in which he describes purchasing a young Black woman to cook and do his laundry. At the end of the Civil War, the Citadel was taken over by federal troops and was closed for 17 years, reopening in 1882.
When the college reopened, the roles of women in staff positions on campus were better documented in our historical record. Around 1909, we started seeing women in our institutional publications and professional staff roles, such as librarians, nurses, and matrons of the cadet mess hall, which is the campus cafeteria. By the end of World War I, the college had run out of space to expand downtown and started looking for a new location. By the fall of 1922, they had moved and opened a new campus along the Ashley River in Charleston, which is where we remain today.
In the early to mid-20th century, women appear in student newspapers and yearbooks, in glamour shots for beauty columns, and beauty competitions sponsored by the Corps of Cadets. During that time, women appear mostly as girlfriends and as sponsors who hosted parties and fundraisers to support the college. The Citadel also employed full-time hostesses whose job it was to organize dances and social functions and to arrange for etiquette classes and dance lessons for cadets. The Citadel established a summer school in 1949, which women were able to attend. In 1966, the college launched an evening program that accepted women, and 2 years later launched its graduate school program. The first women to graduate from that program received their degrees in 1970. In the mid-1970s, the Citadel appointed its first 2 full-time women professors, Dr. Eileen Mahan and Dr. Marlene O'Brien Seabrook.
Lawsuits against single-gender education began in the 1990s as women sought to take classes during the day throughout the school year, as opposed to evening and summer classes where they were in separate classrooms from members of the Corps. Also at this time, the legal battle to admit women to the Corps began. Shannon Ritchie Faulkner became the first woman to take classes during the day with cadets in 1994 and was admitted to the Corps in 1995. She had started her lawsuit in early 1993, and by the fall of 1995, said that the stress, emotions, and threats against herself and her family left her too emotionally drained to remain at the Citadel, and she left the Corps just a few days after joining. In 1999, Nancy Mace became the first woman to graduate from the Corps Cadets. Mace, today a congresswoman representing South Carolina's 1st Congressional District, grew up in Goose Creek, South Carolina. The first African-American women to graduate from the Corps were these 7 women in the class of 2002. Of this first cohort, graduates are in the military, business, and medical fields today. Sarah Zorn, class of 2019, was the Citadel's first female regimental commander, the highest ranking cadet in the Corps. This past school year, 2024-2025, the Citadel had 289 women cadets, which was about 12% of the Corps. We've come a long way from 4 women cadets in 1996, but we still have a ways to go.
And now we'll share a brief overview of our special collections. The Citadel Archives is an institutional repository focusing on the history of the college. We collect college records and publications and also have a wonderful photograph collection dating back to 1849, cadet letters and diaries over the years, architectural drawings, artwork, artifacts, and have collections related to former faculty, staff, and to school presidents. We have been actively looking for stories in our existing archive collections related to women over time, and are also working on collecting and recording interviews with women to preserve in our archive. And we will share a few examples shortly. We also have a small museum housed in our library, which is popular with visitors and with families. Over the past few years, we have updated the museum timeline and artifacts to represent more women and other underrepresented stories from Citadel history. And now we are going to share some of our favorite stories and collections that we've discovered over the past few years, and I'll hand us back to Danielle.
The first collection I would like to share is the Faculty Wives Club that was formed in 1950 to further the interests of the Citadel and promote social contacts among the faculty families. That first year, there were approximately 90 wives of the faculty, and that would included staff, military, and academic officers. Their activities included the mailing of Easter seal letters, over 25,000 of them, and preparing Christmas gifts for the Charleston Crippled Children's Society. They organized blood mobiles, they would hold a tea each fall for newcomers to the faculty, and they would serve punch and cookies at all the Citadel hops. The Faculty Wives Club meetings included guest speakers discussing topics that you might expect for that time, like hostessing, menu planning, and flower arranging. However, the majority of their activities were focused on authors, dance, poetry, music, architecture, ecology, psychiatry, and they were often presented by female guest speakers. This was not just a social club for these women, but an opportunity to learn and have a support system and a life outside the home. We have some wonderful scrapbooks and photos in our archives documenting their activities. One of their projects was to publish a cookbook titled Seasoned at the Citadel in 1986 with entries from their membership. I have spent countless hours looking through these items. They really provide such a fascinating window into their lives. Kathy Bowers became the first female security officer here at the Citadel in April of 1980. She worked on campus as a librarian for 6 years and attended Trident Technical College here in the area where she majored in criminal justice. Officer Bowers was quoted in the student newspaper, The Brigadier, as saying she felt her secretarial work became boring at times, so she decided to take on the challenge of a job in law enforcement. I found this particularly exciting because I stumbled upon this newspaper article while researching something completely different. It was an unexpected and really interesting find. This is Patricia McCarver. She was the Citadel's first vice president, serving as vice president of communications from 2002 to 2005. She then served as director of the Oral Communications Lab from 2007 to 2013, and also served as interim vice president for external affairs. The Oral Communications Lab was dedicated as the Patricia McCarver Public Speaking Lab. This story is special to me because Patricia is my neighbor, and I'm excited to conduct my first oral history interview with her very soon.
The first student to complete the required work for a Master's of Art in Teaching from the Citadel's Graduate College was Maxine Hudson. Ms. Hudson finished her coursework in December of 1969 and received her diploma during their first commencement ceremony in May of 1970. In the summer of 2020, during the height of the pandemic, I interviewed Ms. Hudson, who has since passed, by Zoom and by phone. Her interview is available to read and listen to on our digital collections website. Ms. Hudson was from Goldsboro, North Carolina, where she was born in 1928. She left home to go to college at the University of South Carolina when she was just 16. She took classes at the Citadel in 1955 to review her South Carolina teaching certificate, and then returned in 1968 to start her master's degree. In our interview, Ms. Hudson remembered a librarian at the Citadel, Herbert Nath, who she said was an absolute genius and always knew how to help you. She remembered that her classes were in Capers Hall on campus, but the closest women's restroom was in another building down the street, which was called Bond Hall. The teachers were initially frustrated by having to take long breaks while all of the women walked to another building to use the restroom, so eventually they allowed women to use a men's restroom where they were taking classes. Ms. Hudson's support came from her family. She said that on Sunday nights in her home, whoever had the most pressing issues received help from the family. Her daughter would type her papers, and her daughter and husband corrected her grammar and punctuation. She said that on days that she had classes, she would put dinner in her automatic oven to cook before she went to work, and when she got home from school, it would be ready for the family to eat. Ms. Hudson took classes at the Citadel in the evening, so there wasn't a lot of interaction with cadets, but she said that she remembered the cadets were always helpful in offering directions around campus and handled having women on campus with grace and dignity. Mrs. Louise Dufour was originally from Clark County, Virginia. She lived on the Citadel's campus with her husband, modern language professor Alfred E. Dufour. When her husband passed in 1955, Mrs. Dufour was appointed Citadel hostess, a role she served in for 18 years, from 1955 to 1973. She was known as the mother of cadets. Students would go to her for advice and when they needed to talk. In an interview, Mrs. Dufour said that cadets would tell her all their problems about girls, schools, and anything else. She said that she could write a book about some of the things she had heard from them, but assured the interview that she wouldn't. The hostess's role was to supervise campus social life by organizing and chaperoning dances and parties, arranging dance lessons for cadets, and making arrangements for the dates and families of cadets to stay in private homes throughout Charleston during their visits. When Mrs. Dufour retired from her role as hostess, she moved just one block away from the college's front gates so she could be close to the Citadel. Her family has been donating additions to her archive collection over the past few years. And just this week, I made another discovery in our archive related to Mrs. Dufour. I came across a collection under the name Mary Rivers and realized that Mrs. Rivers was Mrs. Dufour's daughter. Mary, who went by Betty, her collection in our archive includes a party invitation to campus and a number of dance cards, which were small booklets, often with pencils attached, that were given out at Citadel dances, which were called hops, as souvenirs, so you could write in the names of your dance partners. Dr. Marlene O'Brien Seabrook was the first African-American woman to serve as a full-time faculty member at the Citadel. Dr. O'Brien Seabrook was from Newberry, South Carolina. She began teaching full-time at the Citadel in 1975 as a faculty member in the education department. She was also a world-renowned artist and was one of 44 artists selected to create works commemorating the inauguration of President Barack Obama. An oral history was recorded with Dr. O'Brien Seabrook in 2013, during which she described what it was like to be the first female African-American professor at the Citadel, one of only two women professors at that time. We are going to play a short excerpt from that interview in which she describes her husband joining Citadel faculty spouses at a special event on campus.
Now, my husband is retired Army Lieutenant Colonel. he got the most fun out of being my lady. He was so fun. When the Board of Visitors would have oyster roasts or parties, or the president would have parties, and we were invited. At that time, he was working in Orangeburg, and he would come up, but anytime, he called them command performances. That's from his military life. So anytime I had a command appearance, he would come. And so he would dress and he would say, your lady is almost ready, It just got to be an in-house joke with us. And then Prince Charles of England was the guest on campus once. And there was reserved seating for the spouses of the faculty because we were in academic regalia. We had to march in. And it was, Art just had more fun because there he was, the only African-American man in this sea. You think this is a sea of Caucasian women who really wanted to tell him that he didn't belong there, but they didn't know how, And so they really thought that he had missed where he was supposed to go. And so finally one of them said, this is.
In the spring of 2024, the Citadel celebrated the 25th anniversary of women graduating from the Corps of Cadets, looking back to 1999 when Nancy Mace became the first woman graduate. That spring, the Citadel Archive shared an invitation with all women who had graduated from the Corps to record short videos with stories and reflections on their cadet experiences. These are just a few of the participants, and you can watch videos that we recorded through our archive website. Some of the stories were difficult to hear. Stories of loneliness and isolation, of being left out by your classmates, being publicly confronted by alumni and others who were upset that women had joined the Corps, and an overall feeling that you did not belong at the college. But some of the stories are also beautiful and hopeful. Making time for moments of joy, singing, dancing, and dressing up in silly clothes, stories of family and friends whose unconditional love and support helped to brighten the dark days. We also recorded an interview with M. Greg Green, seen here, who was a woman while a cadet and transitioned to a man after his graduation. And so Greg shared a unique perspective, which invites us and maybe challenges us to widen our understanding of what it means to be a woman at the Citadel.
One of the largest audiences we reach to teach women's history at the Citadel is a class presentation that we give to freshman cadets as part of their leadership orientation classes called Where We Come From. This class features stories of history that have been underrepresented in our institutional narrative, including women. We collect feedback from the cadets after the presentation, and we often hear that women feel empowered and inspired by the stories we share. Our campus hosts a professional development day for faculty and staff, and we have presented sessions on the hidden stories from the Citadel archives. Our sessions have been very popular, and we consistently receive positive feedback. We plan on focusing our session next year on stories of Citadel women. During Women's History Month, we facilitate events where attendees are invited to share personal stories in response to questions and prompts, make connections across campus, and celebrate women. We also print out images of women from the Citadel for participants to take with them and to share. This is one of my favorite events of the year, and I always feel inspired afterwards. Beyond our campus, we have also presented at conferences on our teaching and promotion through the Librarian archives. Some presentations have focused solely on women, including a virtual session titled Stories of Citadel Women, and a virtual discussion with Sarah Zorn and Catherine Christmas, the Citadel's first two female regimental commanders, which was moderated by Citadel Board of Visitors member Allison Dean Love.
In addition to presentations and classes, we also curate a number of displays in the Danielle Library to celebrate women's history. The first picture here is of a collaboration with former Citadel photographer Russell Pace, who was the campus photographer when women entered the Corps and who took thousands and thousands of images of women cadets over time. We also seek out unique opportunities. The second picture is from a grant-funded project with the National Collaborative for Health Equity, where we produced a 10-minute video on underrepresented Citadel history. And for that video, we were able to interview women students, faculty, and staff to include their perspectives on women at the Citadel. And the last thing I'll mention here is a book chapter that we published in 2024 on narrative change work at the Citadel that includes increasing the number of stories of women and other underrepresented groups and individuals at the college over time. And we are currently working on several articles that focus on women's history at the Citadel, which we will submit to journals over the next year.
My view of what it means to be a woman at the Citadel has changed over time. Before I worked here, I only knew the school from the outside. I had ideas about its history, its traditions, and what it represented. But that perspective shifted once I joined the faculty. And it keeps changing, especially now that I'm researching and sharing the stories of women who have been a part of this institution. Every day, I get to connect with students, staff, faculty, alumni, and visitors. Through these conversations, both formal and informal, I've built relationships, especially with women whose stories often reflect my own experiences. These days, I do find myself thinking not only about how I belong here, but also how I can play a role in shaping that story for the women who come after me. As I've dug into the history of women here at the Citadel, I've recognized pieces of myself, of my family and community, and of women I've known throughout my career. In many ways, the Citadel is like any other college campus for women, but its long and complex history amplifies those experiences and gives them even greater meaning. Sometimes we still hear people say there were no women here before they were allowed into the Corps of Cadets, but we know that isn't true. Women have always been a part of this place. As staff members, professors, guest speakers, as the wives and hostesses who supported the institution behind the scenes, they were always here doing the essential but often invisible work that women have always done. This work, collecting and sharing their stories, is personal to me and meaningful, and I'm grateful to be a part of it. I look forward to what's ahead, the new projects, the discoveries, and continuing to play even a small part in the ongoing story of women at the Citadel.
Many challenges for women at the Citadel over time mirror challenges women face at other colleges and universities and in other spaces across the country. But I think that the single gender nature of the Corps of Cadets for its first 150 years of its existence, and then the controversial public battle for women to enter the Corps and for women to feel like they belong in the Corps, created an especially challenging environment for women at the Citadel today. In the 19th through the mid to late 20th centuries, women on campus were mostly in service roles or in the roles of nurturers, wives, girlfriends, mothers, and mother figures. In the 1970s, when a small number of women began teaching full-time and when women began receiving degrees through the graduate college, we start to see a shift, the beginnings of change. However, like Dr. O'Brien Seabrook said in her oral history, you don't expect to see big changes made for just a few people. Today, we have more than just a few women on campus. The Citadel has its second woman provost. We have women in leadership positions, women faculty members, women in many staff positions, and women make up 12% of the Corps. We are making progress, but there are still obstacles, divides, and biases to be confronted. If you brought 50 women from across our campus together and asked them what it means to be a woman at the Citadel today, or what it has meant historically, I think you would hear 50 different responses. I know that my own perspective of women in higher education has changed over time, from the roles I've held from my graduate years through my professional career, the relationships I've developed with women students, staff, and other faculty members, and relationships and experiences that I've had as I've gotten older. And so I take my role as archivist seriously in the way that we both capture stories today from women and how we share stories from our past We have to be truthful, but I think we also have to be compassionate. We need to be open to hearing and understanding painful experiences, some of which may differ from our own, but also seek out and share those stories that help to inspire, motivate, and give us hope. And so we will end on that note, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you for attending our presentation on researching, preserving, and teaching women's history at the Citadel.